You're listening to the Comic Crusaders podcast. I am your host, Al Mega, CEO of Comic Crusaders and Undercover Capes. In this show, I'm sitting down with creators from all walks of life to talk about inspiration, process, the lessons they've learned, and a whole lot more. Wepa familia, what up? Welcome to another Fuego episode of the Comic Crusaders podcast. I'm your host, the one and only Al Mega, and today we have a returning heavy hitter in the game. It's been 5 long years since we last spoke, and man, do we have a lot of stuff to talk about, because he is a writer who blends heart, humor, and pure comic book insanity. And he's back with not just one, but 2, folks, monster projects. So from saving the planet with Dynamite's new Captain Planet comic to unleashing kaiju-level chaos with 10-ton Titan Terrier. Wow, that's a lot of T's. From Papercutz, the man's pen game is on another level. So strap in, folks, Nerd Nation, because it's time to catch up with this crime reporter turned creator, the powerhouse himself, the big boss, the savage writer, David Pepose. How you doing, homie?
I'm doing great. Al, what an intro. I truly appreciate it. I'm so glad to be on the show, so glad to be catching up with you. And yeah, excited to talk comics with you today.
Yeah, man, absolutely. 5 long years since the OZ comic. I know I told you that in the room. You said, oh, shit, that's been a while.
I can't believe it's been this long since we've talked. We will make sure that it's not 5 years between this conversation and the next.
Well, I hope not, because you're murdering the game and you're definitely giving us a lot of topics to talk about. Let me tell you, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But before we get into all this new stuff, the 2025 madness, let's have a little brief down, because it's been a minute. What's the wildest thing that's been happening to you since your last time on the Crusaders?
A lot has changed in the last 5 years. I have been writing for Marvel for the last few years, working on books like Savage Avengers, Moon Knight, City of the Dead, Punisher, Cable, Love, and Chrome, which is coming out presently, and lots of other smaller assignments in the middle. I got married, which is great. I have a new dog, and I've done just a bunch of other new projects as well. Stuff like Space Ghost, Captain Planet, over at Dynamite, the upcoming Speed Racer over at Mad Cave, 10-ton Titan Terrier coming out at Papercutz. I feel like I've been very busy, and that's a freelancer's favorite 4-letter word. So it's really been, I still kind of pinch myself every day that I get to do this. But this really is my dream job. And I'm so grateful to everybody who's really kind of rallied around me and my work that's allowed me to continue with this amazing career.
Fantastic. So you got to let them know out here. So from crime scenes to comic scenes, do you miss the danger reporting or battling deadlines in comics just as deadly?
Yeah, I think, it's slightly different, but I mean, I think, when I was working in a newspaper, it was, you're hitting sort of those daily deadlines but you're also kind of, you're sort of the big, I think, brain power is just finding where the stories are. But once you found them, then it's kind of a matter of asking the right questions and sort of just being open to listening as people talk and kind of finding ways to sort of just ask the questions that are important. I think for writing fiction and writing comics, you're really putting a lot of yourself into these things. And so it's a different type of deadline. And it was something that when I started my career, I was often very frustrated with, is this idea of I'm used to filing daily stories, and you can't really do that as a comics creator. I tend to file scripts. It takes me about 5 days to do a script. And that's after kind of like having trained myself up and trying to simplify my process in different ways. But there's always a part of me that's kicking myself saying, well, why can't I write more? Why can't I write faster? And I think it's because these are emotional stories. You need to draw stuff out of yourself. You need to figure out, like, especially with licensed characters, how do I say something that is new with these characters, but also feels very personal and natural to me as a creator. And so, it's always an ongoing process. And I'm always kind of trying to retool how I do things to make it, to make it more streamlined, but not to sacrifice any level of quality, and hopefully to get better at what I'm doing. So yeah, it's also, when you're working at home, you don't work I'm not working in a newsroom anymore. And so there is that sort of, you have to really motivate yourself. You have to make sure that like every day you are doing something that gets you closer to finishing a script or gets you closer to putting a book to bed. And, that can take a lot out of you if you're not careful. So I think the deadlines are slightly less, they're a little more relaxed in terms of the timing, but I think in terms of the sheer amount of effort and energy that I put into it, this is way more involved than when I was in a newsroom, but it's also way more fulfilling and it's way more personal.
And again, you are keeping busy because you have a lot of stuff and you've been doing a lot of stuff, blowing up the industry, if you will. So, what was your biggest I made it moment since we last spoke?
Boy,
what was it in particular?
Yeah, I feel like getting to write for Marvel was really kind of like a big moment for me. In that, I grew up reading Marvel. It was sort of like being drafted to the Yankees. And I think being able to work with that kind of level of collaborator and that level of character and those level of editors, I think, that really gave me a lot
it made you bring a torpedo back, since you mentioned the Yankees. I know, bro. You were smashing.
It's nice sort of being able to say like, oh, like these are the people who are like at the top of the industry, and having them not only have read my work, but feel confident enough in my work that they would then allow me to play ball with them. That's been really lovely. I think also though, I think the response to Space Ghost, that is really, I think that has been such a fun book to work on. And talking about what we were saying earlier about how do you say something that's new with a character, but that still feels natural to me as a creator, I think I really kind of found my sweet spot with that book. And so seeing the response to it has really been heartening in a lot of ways, and has really opened up the doors for me for some really cool other projects like Captain Planet and Speed Racer. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I've ever felt a moment where I feel like I've made it, because like, the industry is always kind of in turmoil, and you're only as good as sort of your last work. But I do feel like I've grown significantly since, I started in this business. I think I'm about to hit my 8-year anniversary like this week, I think, since my first book came out. And so, yeah, it's yeah, but being able to work on books like this, it really is, it shows how far I've come, at least.
Fantastic. Now let's jump into it, because you mentioned it, baby. Captain Planet. Yo, yeah. How did this gig land in your lap? Was it the power is yours type of moment, or what?
Yeah. So, it's funny. Captain Planet is a book that I've actually pitched around the industry pretty much as long as I've been a writer.
Really? Check you out. Oh, shit. You're a Planeteer, huh?
Well, it's one of those things that I think Captain Planet as a cartoon often gets a bad rap. For being very much a product of its time, came out in 1990, and also that it's not particularly subtle about its politics. And I have always felt that it's not hard to sort of bring a vintage property into the modern era using modern storytelling techniques, and that's an approach I've taken on Space Ghost and Speed Racer. But I feel like the politics of it all, I'd argue reality's gotten a lot less subtle in the last few years. And so for me, taking those things into account, I've always felt that Captain Planet has all the elements for a blockbuster success. It's got this inherently diverse and multicultural and international cast that has been done in such an organic way that we haven't even seen since like the days of giant-sized X-Men. The threats that they face are so timely, between like environmental disaster, which we're all living in right now.
A lot more disasters than that, but
yeah, it's like I live in Los Angeles. We just had the wildfires. My parents.
Oh man, were you and your family safe?
Thankfully safe. Thankfully outside of the evacuation zones. But like that was a scary week
I can't
for
imagine.
everybody in Los Angeles. I lived in New York during Hurricane Sandy. My parents live in the Midwest. They were hit with a whole bunch of tornadoes
So what
recently.
I'm learning here, based on those two things, is wherever you are, people don't be. It's dangerous.
Yeah, like I'm sort of the unlucky rabbit's foot when it comes to that sort of stuff, I guess. But I think also like the flip side is like Captain Planet, it wasn't just like, oh, we're fighting environmental disaster. It's also they weren't shying away that it was human greed and ambition that fueled all of it. And I think finally, I think pop culture is caught up. We're pitching this book as X-Men meets Avatar: The Last Airbender. And
I
so we're
love it.
able to kind of take these interesting like pop culture strains and inject it into the core concept that in 1990, none of these things had existed. But I think that way it allows us to kind of give all these characters some really exciting moments, give them a lot of agency, to really make this like a fun and compelling and interesting ensemble book that isn't like anything else you'll see on the stands. Uh,
Beautiful.
so yeah, it's been I've been pitching this book for forever. And when Dynamite announced that they had gotten the rights to Captain Planet at San Diego Comic-Con last year,
You said,
I marched over. I saw the press release and I marched over to my publisher Dick Barucci and my editor Joe Rybant. And I said, if nobody else is working on this, like if you don't have a creative team attached, like it needs to be me. So right place, right time, and 10 years of pitching.
And there we go. And folks, before we dive in a little bit more into this whole new book, guess what? There's a trailer, baby. Yes, a comic book trailer. Earth's greatest protector returns, baby. And Dynamite Comics, Captain Planet numero uno, baby. Check this out. Well, I'm digging the art, man. Hey, the rings. Woo! Nice. Look at that detail on the art. Beautiful. Oh, the coloring. Woof. Oh! Look at those covers, yo. Jesus. Look at that, folks. Diablo. Oh, that's fire. Yo, legends. What? A Mark Spears cover? They're going nuts for this. Jay Lee. Woo. John Christian Ward. Diablo. Look at this, folks. Ben Oliver. Wow, that's an amazing cover, man. Love the colors. The power is yours, baby, but you got to. Oh, you got to order that book now, people. For real, the power is yours, man. That looks absolutely dope, man. I am digging it. So talk to me, Captain Planet. Such a cult classic. What kind of balance are you bringing between nostalgia and giving some readers something new?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, for me, my approach whenever I'm tackling kind of a nostalgia property, whether it's Captain Planet or Space Ghost or Speed Racer, is I don't want to try to I don't want to just imitate what came before. I don't see it as a continuation of the original cartoons. I tend to do a full on reboot. It's brand new continuity, so that way you don't have to have watched the original cartoon in order to appreciate what we're doing here. But if you are a diehard fan, we are bringing in all sorts of characters and Easter eggs from the original series, so you'll find stuff to appreciate. But yeah, this is a brand new continuity. Literally, all you need to do is pick up issue 1, coming out on April 23rd, and yeah, I think for me, it's about how do you take these kind of core elements that I think are so classic and so timeless, and how do you take how do you remove it from that original context of 1990? And really update it for how like the world outside our window has changed in the year.
You make it sound so old. 1990. My God, I was just in high school. Damn,
yeah.
fuck.
It'll be the 35th anniversary. Around I think when the trade drops. The first trade. So yeah, I think, and I think it's just taking these characters and just saying like, okay, like knowing, for example, how a character like Linka, who when that show debuted, she was from the Soviet Union. Things changed even in the course of that original run, but things have changed obviously significantly since then. So, she was considered the conservative Planeteer in those original cartoons. And we've done kind of a full 180 with her, where she's like the most liberal and progressive member of the team, where she's like headlining her own underground eco-activist band in Russia, kind of in the vein of like Pussy Riot.
I love it.
And finding ways to also like, the cartoons, they never really had enough time to dig that deeply into the characters. And so being able to kind of like say, all right, like what's the deal with these characters' backstories and how do they each fit into different elements of the greater environmental conversation? Wheeler, for example, we've recontextualized him as an auto worker from Detroit. And so he's got very complicated feelings about like the environmental movement and how he perceives that it's affected his bottom line and his industry. Whereas Mati, for example, is an indigenous person from Brazil, who his people have literally been forced off their lands by corrupt mining interests. And, he was ready to fight back in a particularly kind of brutal way. And then he gets the power of heart and it cleanses his mind of all rage and violence and turns him into this avowed pacifist. He doesn't have to throw a punch because the power of heart will let him do all these other things. And so, yeah, I think it's like finding different elements for that to just really make these characters feel three-dimensional, but also relevant to like the environmental conversation of this book. And really, it's they're like the X-Men, but even I think one step removed. They're not superheroes. They're ordinary people who have been granted extraordinary power, and they're sort of the only ones who can kind of save the world from this ruthless billionaire that's seeking to exploit it. And I think that impetus of these are just people who you could run into off the street. They don't have costumes, they don't have code names. I think that is really what makes this series so interesting to me, is that the humanity is very much on display. And even though there's Captain Planet, the title character, who's sort of this immortal elemental demigod that they're able to summon, he still knows that like ultimately the power to save our world is like in our hands, people like you and me on the street level. And so, yeah, I think that's something that's very inspiring. And I think these are the kind of heroes that they've long been overlooked, but I think they are the heroes that meet today's moment.
Love this. I love it. Now, were there any storylines or eco topics that you had to tackle? Like, was there a moment where you said, nah, we're going to go full climate apocalypse here?
Well, I think there is an element to that, in that this is sort of half superhero story, half disaster movie. Like I think in 1990, climate change was seen as a hypothetical. It was sort of, there's an oil spill that's going to affect these animals, but, or there's a forest fire. But I think now, like, it's not a hypothetical anymore. We're seeing all these things playing out in real time. So, you've got, Hurricane Sandy is a great example of all this. I mean, in that, climate change is happening in our face, and so there is that element of that. But I think also, and the show never really shied away from it, is just like, this isn't just like, this happened at random. Like it's, there are a lot of people with a lot of money who say, we don't care about the environmental cost. We can buy ourselves out of consequences, and whatever happens to the little guy on the street, that's not our concern. And you see it, in today's government right now, where you have a billionaire who's like directing a lot of things that go on with today's public policy with a lot of impact. So having a villain like Lucian Plunder, that I think is very timely, especially in the year 2025. But yeah, there's also like, just adding kind of what's the elevated twist to it. What's the thing that sort of ties all this back to the Planeteers? And I don't want to spoil too much of what we're going to be doing here, but this opening storyline, it's all very personal. There's a reason why the Planeteers are sort of drawn front and center into all of this, and some stuff that puts them on the back foot. But yeah, I think trying to sort of figure out that interplay between environmental disaster and sort of the people that are causing it through their own exploitive business practices. Yeah, I think that's something that feels pretty timely today, and didn't seem to be particularly challenging or difficult to really dig into.
All right, and again, you said you've been pitching this book for quite some time. Dynamite got the rights. You said no one else but me. Now talk about the rest of that team. How did this team get put together? Because it is a beautiful looking book. Holy shit. I mean, in that video, that art, those colors, the lettering, everything was just popping, yo.
You know, we got to give my editor, Joe Rybant, the credit here, because Joe, you know, he cast my Space Ghost book really well with Jonathan Lau and Andrew Dahlhaus and Taylor Esposito.
Yeah.
And so the bar was set really high as far as Captain Planet was concerned. And, you know, I really want to give a shout out to my artist and co-creator in the book, Aman Casalos, who I wasn't familiar with his work when we started working together. He's worked on stuff like Pathfinder. Over at Dynamite, but he came to this book really hungry. You know, he's got a style that's like a little bit of Gary Frank and a little bit of Steve Dillon, but also you can see a little bits of like Frank Quitely and Doug Monkey and some of the details. And he came to this book swinging, like really like understood the assignment from the jump. Like he's responsible for our amazing Captain Planet redesign with the hot dad beard. You know, the only global warming I'll accept. And Aman, you know, he really is, he is a unicorn in a lot of ways, and that he does this big bombastic action stuff in a really cool and neat way. It looks amazing, but he's also the characters really act. You know, he adds so much expressions and body language, and so it really elevates what I've put on the page. In that, like, when you fall in love with these characters, it's because like Aman has been so thoughtful in the way that they are interacting with one another, and it makes them very engaging and very compelling and appealing. So yeah, he really has nailed it, and he really made sure that the Planeteers themselves, when we did kind of our redesigns of them, because they don't have the matching outfits for the cartoon, you know, that their designs do have a little personality about them, and that it does reflect, you know, where they come from in their individual countries, but also just like you could run into these people on the streets. So I feel like Aman really is an MVP. He's done such a fantastic job, and seeing the way that he's also redesigned some of the eco villains, it's very cool. You'll be seeing a few of them as the series progresses. But yeah, I think he's amazing. Our colorist, Jorge Sutil, is fantastic. He really, I threw the gauntlet down at Joe when we were talking about colors, where I was so impressed with the way that Andrew Dahlhaus interacted with Jonathan Lau's inks on Space Ghost, that I said, we need a colorist that's that good, that plays that nicely with Aman's work, because Aman is really leaving it all in the field. And so Jorge really rose to the occasion on this one. And so I'm really pleased with how the visuals all come together. And then rounding out our crew is our letterer, Jeff Eckelberry. He and I hadn't worked together before, but I really like the way that he approaches this. There's sort of like, it's a very kind of like old school, kind of almost indie comics approach to the way that he's doing the lettering on this. That looks very different than any of the other books that I'm doing, but I think fits really nicely for sort of the Captain Planet vibe. So yeah, I think, you know, we've got a great team, and then, you know, bringing together some of our cover artists. You know, Mark Spears was kind enough to do a first issue cover for us.
Yeah, crazy. He's hot right now. Let me tell you, on the collector side, Jesus.
Yes, he really went above and beyond for this Bane cover.
Yeah, I think there's going to be another hot one collectors are going to want. Let me tell you.
We got, you know, Jay Lee, who's doing actually a series of connecting covers for the first 6 issues of the book. So we've seen Captain Planet, Kwame, and Wheeler so far. So we've still got Linka, Guy, and Mati left to see. Christian Ward, who he and I have gotten friendly over the years. He was kind enough to also supply us some amazing covers. Nice. He's done some truly stellar work. And then Ben Oliver is rounding out our crew, and he's done some really cool stuff as well with all that. And so, yeah, you know, and Chad Harden, I should also give him a shout out, because he will be joining us in our cover rotation starting in issue 2.
Well,
and so, nice. Yeah, you know, I feel like it's nice to be working with a team that believes in the vision, you know, because I do feel like Captain Planet is one of those characters. And I think it's the reason I was able to get this book, is that a lot of people overlook the character. A lot of people like turn their nose up at it. A lot of people say, oh, it's preachy, or, oh, you know, he's got the crop top and the mullet. And, you know, does anybody want this? And my thinking is it doesn't really require
it's
too
too
much
kitty. If
knowledge.
they didn't watch it, Captain Planet just appears. Oh, an environmental little kitty thing, like okay, whatever. Now I understand. Yeah, some of the stories, as you said, that had depth to it.
It's a character with untapped potential, and I think if there's anything that I've learned over the last like year and a half working on Space Ghost, it's that like readers, there's no. I dispute the idea of superhero fatigue. I think what readers want is to be surprised.
Yes.
And that's hard to do, in the main superhero universes that have been so thoroughly strip mined. And also, for better or for worse, social media has sort of trained readers to be cynical about these announcements and to try to anticipate the story, which means that they enjoy it less because they're less present in it.
Yeah.
Because then it's sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't, because either you've guessed where it's going to go because it organically goes there, or you've guessed wrong and then you're like, this doesn't feel right. I think being able to kind of tackle these properties that have been less thoroughly mined, like Space Ghost or Speed Racer or Captain Planet, it gives readers kind of a different universe to explore that is fresh to them, that they don't know all the twists and turns and they're not able to guess all the twists and turns. And so that I think is a win-win for all involved. And I think that speaks to why so many of these nostalgia books like Transformers and Thundercats and Space Ghost and Herculoids, why they've taken off is because people are looking to be surprised. So yeah, I think Captain Planet it's been long overlooked, but I think pop culture and sort of the world that we live in is finally caught up. And so, I've long thought that it's due for a 21st century revival. And I feel very grateful and fortunate to be the guy to usher that in.
Yeah, let's go. Now, let's be real. If David Pepose had a Planeteer ring, what would your power be? Now, be honest, bro. Heart, fire, coffee.
Yeah, I would prefer wind because I feel like that's the thing that's least likely to wreck my apartment. But I have the feeling it would probably be fire, which would go poorly for all involved. But yeah, I would, yes, I've thought about this and I'm like, wind is like the only one that like doesn't result in like immediate catastrophe and everything to everything around me. Or like if I got the heart ring, like it would probably like just immediately like drown my brain. So yeah, I guess wind.
Excellent. Now we're talking Captain Planet, but you also got some other stuff coming out. Yeah. I mean, you stay busy, man. Now I want to flip the page over here and talk this new project. Let me add this baby over here real quick, man. The 10-ton Titan Terrifier. Now, first off, this title just slaps. Again, all those T's and all, it's going to be fun to say that real fast. Now, where the heck did this wild idea come from? Well, you just vibing and said, let me make a kaiju dog, you're just chilling.
Yeah. So 10-Ton Titan Terrier is a book that's really near and dear to me. I've been working on this since 2019. So it's been in the works for a minute. And how it came to be, well, I guess first to describe the book, it's Pokemon meets Pacific Rim. It's about a meteor crash lands into Earth, and it's got kaiju eggs, but it's also got an alien battle suit. The problem is the only creature on Earth that can turn the suit on happens to be an 11-inch tall terrier. And so it's the story of sort of a scientist and his dog trying to save the world from these kaiju, while also sort of trying to navigate their dynamic as man's best friend. And
oh my God, I'm digging it.
This book, is very personal to me. I wrote it. I had a terrier named Holly, who she was diagnosed with melanoma in the months before COVID. And so I wrote this book while taking her to her radiation appointments. As I said, I don't know if I'm going to be able to save my dog. She was an elderly dog. She passed like 2 weeks before the COVID shutdowns. But I was like, I don't know if I can save my dog, but I can at least make her immortal. And so I wrote this book really to kind of, I think, to fill what I considered the missing food group on my convention table, which is, I wrote Spencer and Locke. I've written The Punisher. Yeah, I've written a lot of books that are not family friendly. And I would always break my heart to see like a little kid see Spencer and Locke and be like, I want to buy this. And me having to say in no uncertain terms, can you buy this book?
I don't know, kiddo. I need ID first.
Having a book that can appeal to sort of a Pixar audience. If you're okay with The Incredibles, you'll be totally fine with this book. That I think was something that like really kind of scratched an itch that I'd been long wanting, because I always want to have something on my table that I can sell to anybody, and not being able to have something to sell to kids was a sore subject for a long time. And so I've been working on this book for a long time with artist Ornella Greco, who is
Nice.
she is so fantastic, just a perfect collaborator. And so, she and I and our letterer, Justin Birch, we've been slowly building this story for quite some time. And I was fortunate enough, I've known Mike Martz at Mad Cave since I was a college intern, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He was one of my supervisors at DC Comics. And we've been fortunate enough to work together on several books since. We've worked together on Scout's Honor over at Aftershock, and The Devil That Wears My Face over at Mad Cave. And we had lunch, and I was pitching some other projects at him, and I mentioned Terrier. And he goes, I love this art, and we've just acquired Papercutz, and we're looking for more content. Would you have any interest? And so it really felt like a win-win. Papercutz has been fantastic. A big shout out to our editor, Adam Walenta. They've really gone above and beyond to making sure that this is like a nice looking book, that all the design elements look really cool. They're doing both a paperback and a hardcover edition for this book, I believe. I'm very excited for people to get to read this. I've sort of pitched it as like, it's an age appropriate version of Pacific Rim, perfect for kaiju fans and dog lovers of all ages.
Yeah, because I was gonna ask, kids comic or not, are there any Easter eggs for us grown-up nerds hiding in 10-ton types?
Oh yeah, totally. Well, the very first monster in the book is a monster called Eradicator. And I think that's very much kind of our love letter to like Godzilla. We've got sort of a love letter to Kong later on in it. A little bit of a nod to Mothra. Like there's certainly bits and pieces in there. We actually do have a shout out to the creator of Godzilla somewhere in the book.
Oh, what? Hey.
I trying to throw little bits and pieces in there, but also just, making the book feel very personal. The character design of Holly, our terrier, not only was she named after my actual terrier, Holly, but she was modeled off of the real life Holly as well as Ornella's terrier. The lead character, Sam, I named him after one of my brothers. Stuff like that. Like, it's refreshing to be able to do a book that feels so big and action heavy and filled with heart, but like that there really isn't like that. There isn't like any elements of darkness to this book. I think it really does wear its heart on its sleeve. And while there's some moments of tension and stakes and danger, it's nice that knowing that this is coming out as a graphic novel. So like, everybody's going to turn out okay at the end. I really hope that we get some new fans out of this one that, once they read Terrier, maybe eventually, they can age up and read Space Ghost or Captain.
Oh my God. Yeah. When they go from Terrier to Spencer Unlocked, they're going to be, oh my God, what a difference.
I can't be responsible for any therapy bills with that. You got to ease your way up.
I dig it. Let me ask you though, what's tougher then? Writing about an environmental superhero with blue skin, or writing dialogue for a dog that smashes buildings?
Oh, Captain Planet, 100%. The thing is that when you're writing for a dog, it's a lot of rar and rough and ow. And that was actually kind of fun, being able to sort of think like, okay, if like knowing that this is not a talking dog, just like, okay, like how would a dog respond in this particular situation?
He doesn't even talk. He is still just a dog.
It's still just a dog. It just happens to be a dog that like is in a suit and so can do things. And I think that's kind of some of the fun of that book, is that like it's still a dog. It's still a boy and his dog. It's just this dog happens to be running around in a 10-ton suit of mass destruction.
And
so
know
how do
what
you
to do with it somehow.
how do you navigate that? You know, and also like, you know, the dog, like how does the dog kind of figure out like what am I supposed to be doing against these monsters? And whereas Captain Planet, you know, you really like, I think there's a lot of moving pieces to something like that. Because not only do you want to make sure that you're kind of honoring the politics of it all and making sure that all the characters, like you're juggling various different characters, but I think there's a delicate balance you have to strike for a Captain Planet book because, and I felt this way a little bit with Space Ghost, but I feel even more so with Cap. You have to establish limits for characters like that. Because otherwise, like if you're just an immortal elemental, like where are the stakes? You know, like where's the challenge? And also, what's stopping the Planeteers from just saying like, okay, I'm just going to summon Captain Planet and he'll take care of everything. You know, how do we keep all these characters in the back foot?
I mean, maybe if it was this generation's Planeteers, they may have done that. You know what? Let me just text them. I ain't doing this.
Yeah, you know, but I think that's like a core part of that series is that the motto is the power is yours. So you can't just like summon a genie and wish your problems away. Like ultimately,
you can't summon Sinbad. You're telling me?
Yeah, you know, like, or what was that movie? Kazam.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, I think Captain Planet was certainly more challenging. Terrier was honestly, once I figured out like the monsters like deals and figured out like names and concepts behind all of them, that series flowed. I think I wrote that thing in like 3 months. 150-page graphic novel, like that just flowed. Whereas Cap took a little while to crack, you know, in terms of just like how do you fit in these core elements of the show, but also how do you make like some of the inconsistencies make sense.
Did you rewatch the old series? You know?
I did. I did. Granted, unlike Space Ghost, where I watched every episode. Same thing with Speed Racer because I didn't grow up with those.
Yeah.
Captain Planet I did grow up with, and so thankfully, like I did retain a lot of it through osmosis. But like I was watching, like first off, I'd never seen the pilot, and so that was extremely helpful in just figuring out like how did these characters come together. And then I watched some core episodes with like Lucian Plunder, or called him Luton Plunder in the original show, Dr. Blight, Duke Nukem, you know, just to kind of like, you know, just get my head around them a little bit. But yeah, I feel like that one was, you know, it took some doing. Just like, how do you explain like why all the Planeteers are in the same place? You know, where are the parents? You know, so like we age them up a little bit, so you don't have to worry about that. And,
please, it's true. All these kids are out all day. You're like, the parents not caring. I mean, you know, the streetlight rule, the hours they spent outside, the streetlight rule didn't apply.
Yeah. You know, I mean, or, you know, they have their own private island, like, you know, and they've got like a demigoddess who's like able to like get them out of like any jam they need. They've got a jet. Those are all things that I kind of like figured out workarounds in terms of like, okay, I don't really want them away from humankind. I want them in New York, which is like, I think emblematic of their whole deal, which is like, they're, you know, they're from all around the world coming together. You know, the solution that we came up for the Geo Cruiser, I'm very proud of. You'll get to see that in issue 4. You know, what we've done with Gaia in ways of sort of making it that she isn't a get out of jail free card. I'm really proud of how we did that.
Nice.
You'll see that in issue 1 and 2. So yeah,
there's some new rules in this, right, being applied that are much more logical, if you will.
yeah. It's how do you make these things feel cohesive? Like making the world feel cohesive, so that anybody who's trying to read it with the level of sophistication that we expect in our monthly comics isn't asking, well, how does this work? You know, this doesn't make sense, and I think that is a skill that is often overlooked when you're working on licensed books. But oftentimes it's not even just like, how do I make this thing read differently? But it's, how do we make these worlds feel coherent and cohesive in a way that instantly makes sense to anyone reading them?
I dig it. My man's Ken. All right. Before we bounce, David, you know, drop that inspirational knowledge for our listeners. Like, what's the biggest lesson you've learned from juggling IP giants and indie chaos, and why should everybody pick up both of these new comics? Like, as soon as they drop, run to the LCS and say, I need this. Pull this, baby.
Well, I think the thing that I've learned over the course of my career is, nobody wants you to force it. You really should take on the projects that not only feel personal to you, that not only feel exciting to you, but that feel natural to you. And I think that's a lesson that has been hard won. And I think it's one that it can sometimes take a little while for people to learn, myself included. And so I think, to answer your question of why should anyone pick up Captain Planet, why should they pick up 1010 Titan Terrier? It's because these books, they do feel so personal to me. And so I think I'm able to sort of take that excitement that I have personally, and it does translate onto the page. And it is something that feels natural and feels like my voice, and it feels like a representation of some of my best work. And so, I'm really excited for people to get to check out these books that feel so different and eclectic, and hopefully, represent a little bit of my range as a storyteller. But yeah, ultimately I'll say, I'm in the business of happy endings. I'm in the business of feel good books. Even the books that start out depressing, it's always about sort of that redemptive climb out of that. And so, I think, write the stuff that makes you feel good.
Yes.
And read the stuff that makes you feel good. And I will say that these books, I think they'll make you feel good. So definitely call your local comic shop, add Captain Planet to your pull list, ask them to pre-order 10-ton Titan Terrier, and also tell them to add a Speed Racer and Space Ghost to your pull list. Buy all my books.
The Pepose verse, baby, the whole vibe. Let's go.
Yeah, buy the whole thing. It keeps our new Terrier Ruby keeps her fed and kibble. So yes. But no, thank you so much for having me, man. I appreciate it.
No, I think you have it. Now, listen, folks. Captain Planet drops April 23rd at your shop, so you have trying to pre-order. So go to your shops for real, pull this time and all. Now, 10-ton Titan. I love that name. 10-ton Titan Terrier. I want to say Terrifier so bad.
That's a different book.
Be the villain. But 10-ton Titan Terrier. When does this one drop?
That drops October 7th.
Oh wow, folks! No excuse. No excuse at all the way in October. Just in time for New York Comic Con too, kiddo.
Yes. Perfect.
Will you be there this year? Any cons?
I will be there.
What's the next con you're doing? So people will get
I'll be at San Diego Comic Con in July. And then I'll be at New York. I'll probably be at LA Comic Con sometime around that window. But those are the 3 shows that I'm doing this year. And then I'll be in the LA area for Free Comic Book Day. I'll be signing at Collector's Paradise in Pasadena, and then Golden Apple Comics in LA proper, and then the Comic Bug on Sunday in their Culver City location, I believe.
You heard it there, folks. You heard it here, all right? David Pepose is going to be hanging out. He's going to be making his presence known. But please order these comic books today, yo. Add them to this pull list, all right? This one you can add immediately. Again, it's dropping this month, April 23rd, so make sure this happens, all right? Now, this one, 10-ton Titan Terrier, folks. Pre-order it right now, but he's dropping in October. No excuse. Tax returns are coming in. There's multiple paydays from here to then. So make it rain, and support the Pepose verse, baby. I'm a fan. I dig it. Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you, my fellow Crusaders. Thank you, Lou, for being brave enough to say something. He goes, social media has trained everyone to have an opinion, wanted or not. Very true, very true. But it's okay. We love you anyway. That haterade is like gasoline. We keep going anyway. Let's do it, baby. It's Omega. It's David Pepose. It's Comic Crusaders podcast. Hasta la próxima, baby. Wepa!
Thank you for listening to the Comic Crusaders podcast. If you like the content, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Also, please visit ComicCrusaders.com and our extended podcast family over at UndercoverCapes.com. And also make sure to download the Comic Crusaders app on the Play Store today.